Did you know that 90% of the world's millionaires invest in real estate? Well, I'm Angel with the Academy Presents Real Estate Investing Rocks, and I'm here to help you if you want to go for your piece of that pie.
My name is Angel, and we've been investing since 2003. We've got 3 single-family homes, a quad, a couple of duplexes, and we are passive in 4 syndications. That's how we got into this. I was a teacher. I resigned in February, but in keeping with my educator heart, we created this educational platform, which is the Academy Presents Real Estate Investing Rocks, and we cover all things real estate. If you have any questions or you ever want me to try and find someone that is an expert in that particular niche or field, let me know, and I will do my best to track someone down. Actually, I will track someone down, get them on the show, and let them help you learn. This is Jeff, and he was a lawyer, or is a lawyer, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about kind of his life story, like being super successful and then hitting the bottom of it and then coming back and being really successful again. And so I think that's going to help a lot of people really be able to see that failures are okay. And it's more of getting back up, dusting yourself off, and just making that forward motion again. So picking up that inertia and getting going again. So Jeff, if you can give us your story.
Sure, absolutely. So, well, first of all, thanks for having me on, and sorry to mess up the beginning of your show there. That's probably my fault, not yours. So anyway, I appreciate it, and it's really great to be here. So like she was saying, my plan is to tell you a little bit about my story. So I'm going to do this in kind of I didn't even warn our illustrious host. Hopefully she is okay with it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out and I'm going to talk not about real estate. We're going to talk about my life, which is what she just alluded to. And then at the end, if we still have a little bit of time, I'm going to talk about a couple of real estate things that I think are really important for people right now. And that will be it. So that's what we're going to do. So hopefully you get real value from what I'm sharing with you today. And I look forward to doing that. So anything else from you, Angel, or are we ready to go?
We are ready to go.
Okay, cool. If anything I say sounds confusing or it doesn't make any sense, feel free to interrupt me because you're here to do that. But I'm going to jump off of camera right now and we will be taking a look at some of my slides. I promise I won't go anywhere, but this way we can, do things like dance in the background and no one will know, right? So it'll be more fun for us that way anyway. That's my theory. So anyway, so hopefully if everything went as planned, you're now seeing the logo of my real estate show. So I think that Angel invited me today because she heard about the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show. And if that's the case, then that's awesome. If not, then, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? So anyway, so let me tell you a little bit about my life story. So the thing about my life story is that I started out, like everyone else, kind of and I'm having a little trouble with my slides, so I apologize. 1 second here. There we go. All right, good. All right, so this is kind of where I was before I got into real estate. So I have a master's degree in business, and I have my law degree. I had my 3 dogs, the dream house in the suburbs. I was pretty well traveled. I'd been to 48 states, Europe, Middle East, South America, all that stuff. But I had a lot of other things going on. I was a lawyer, bankruptcy attorney, so I did a lot of bankruptcies, actually. 2007 is when I graduated law school. So 2008, 9, and 10 was crazy busy in the bankruptcy realm. We had a television commercial, which if you guys get really bored, you can Google. It's called Meet Mary and Bankruptcy and Holst. If you do Meet Mary, Bankruptcy, Holst, you'll find it. And this commercial was ridiculous, but we had this idea where we were going to be the next big bankruptcy firm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so we were pushing that out. But the thing I think that was most important to me at that time and remains one of the most important things to me today is that I never have bad days. So I'm going to start and tell you a little bit about that because I think a lot of people really don't understand what I mean when I say that. I mean, on the surface, it seems like sort of, obvious, if you say you never have bad days, it means you never have bad days. But I usually get like, I don't know, one of like 3 different responses. I'll say to someone, like I might be in a gas station and I'll say, they'll say, how you doing today? And I'll say, oh, great. I never have bad days. And they'll say something like, well, that must be nice. Right. Or they'll say something like, I wish. right? Or they'll say like, I don't believe you. Those are the three responses that I kind of get to the I never have bad days. And I think Angel might be on that last one where she doesn't believe me because she's laughing at me right now. So,
well, no, I'm kind of laughing. I found the commercial.
oh, you found the commercial. Yeah, it's really great. I mean, feel free to share it if you want. I mean, we got nothing going on. I mean, if you want to share it, I mean, we can watch it. But,
well, I found it on my phone.
yeah, well, I guess we can't share it right now then. But anyway, yeah, so the commercial is really funny. And, you know, it was kind of over the top ridiculous, which is sort of how I like to live my life, is over the top ridiculous. But so what happened was when I was 17, I was having, you know, normal teenage angst kind of bad days. And I said, you know, to myself, I don't want to have a bad day today. You know, I don't know what changed that particular day. You know, I was going through something with my girlfriend at the time or whatever, but I was just like, man, I'm young and healthy and I live in America. It could be a lot worse. And so I just said, today's a good day. And I promptly went out and had another bad day. But because I'm really persistent, I just kept telling myself today's a good day every day, all day long for like several months. And then one day I was in a convenience store and someone said to me, you know, how you doing today? And I literally said, without thinking about it, I never have bad days. And I realized, you know, I hadn't had a bad day in a few months. And I haven't had a bad day since. So that was when I was 17. Now I'm, you know, let's just say I'm over 17. And, so like 25 years now without any bad days. Anyway, so that's kind of where I was. You know, I was 30 years old. It's August of 2008. I'd already been to Egypt and to Petra and to Machu Picchu. And there's a picture of my wife in the bottom right-hand corner and I swimming in the Amazon River. Funny story about that. That was right after we went piranha fishing.
I was going to say, aren't the piranhas in that?
Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, what are you thinking, right? Well, we went piranha fishing on like a side stream and we got out to the middle of the river and they're like, do you want to go swimming? And it was stupid hot out, right? I mean, it was just crazy, crazy hot. So we're like, yes, but piranhas. And they're like, oh, don't worry about the piranhas. They don't come out in the middle of the river where there's a lot of current. They like to hang out along the banks. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? So we jump in, we went for a swim and all this stuff. And I wasn't even going to tell the story, but I feel like it's relevant now. Then later that night, we went on this caiman spotting trip where caiman are like a dwarf crocodile, right? They're like 2-3 feet. They live in the river, freshwater crocodiles. And they swim around in there. And so we're on this spotting trip and like, of course we didn't think about caiman when we were worried about the piranhas, right? So I'm watching like, you know, the sides and you're shining a flashlight or like a bright light at the shore and you see their eyes and then they kind of pop out. And I said, man, I didn't remember seeing all these crocodiles on the side of the river at night. And the guy who was driving the boat said, of course not. They hang out in the middle of the river during the day. And so I was like, oh, great. But you know what?
Lord.
We survived it, right? And then shortly after that is actually when we went to Machu Picchu in Peru. And that was like, I'm going to jump back a slide actually, because there's something here. So I don't know, maybe you know this, Angel, but do you know this sculpture that's on the side of this slide? Do you know what that is? It's okay if you don't, because most people don't actually know what that is.
Is that a mermaid?
It's actually Michelangelo's Moses. So it's a Michelangelo sculpture of Moses. So mermaid, Moses, about the same thing, right? So when I was in undergrad in 1999, I was talking to there was a professor that was a history professor, and he was talking about the Renaissance, and he was talking specifically about how Michelangelo was like the quintessential Renaissance man, right? He could do everything. And he stopped and he said, listen, the best sculpture in the entire world is Michelangelo's Moses. Now that's a controversial statement because one, you're making a value judgment against like all other sculptures, but then also you're saying this is better than like some of the other Michelangelo sculptures, right? Like Michelangelo's David, which is, you know, far more famous than this one of Moses. But he was insistent that this was the greatest of all Michelangelo's sculptures. And he told this story about how when, and this is the centerpiece to Pope Julius II's tomb, actually. I think that's the right pope, but one of the popes during the Renaissance commissioned Michelangelo to make this centerpiece for his tomb, right? So he's unveiling this to the Pope, right? And they pull like a sheet off of it, and there's a crowd gathered around, and he's kind of down on his haunches, and he's just not saying anything, right? He's just staring at it. And there's this uncomfortable silence, right? And finally, one of his students comes up to him and he's like, hey, master, like, you have to say something. And he takes a chisel and he throws it at the sculpture and he says one word. He says the word move. Just move, like, because he was so passionate about this idea that, that this sculpture was so great. It was so hyper realistic. I mean, there are parts in the marble in the robe that are so thin you can shine a flashlight through it, right? I mean, it is really, really impressive. And it's about like 10 feet tall. I mean, it's not tiny, right? And it's just a super impressive, carved out of a single block of marble. And anyway, so Michelangelo says, move really loud like this. And he's like, the point is he's just completely totally passionate about this. And I remember hearing that story and I was like, man, I don't even know sorry about that. Something fell above me. Hopefully it wasn't serious. And anyway, so I hear this story about this, about this thing. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't even know what I want to do with my life. And here Michelangelo's like so hyper into this one sculpture that he's willing to stand in front of the most important person in his life and the most important person in the whole world. The popes during the Renaissance were like a combination of like God and like the president of every country in the world, right? I mean, these are like, there isn't anyone today that's nearly as powerful as what a pope would have been at that time. He's willing to throw it all away and scream at this piece of rock in front of the Pope. So he's just that passionate. And I think I need to see this so I can figure out what I want to do. And that's actually how I ended up doing all this other stuff, right? Like going on these excursions. Because in 99, about 3 weeks after I heard that story, I hopped on a plane to London. And the Moses is in Rome. So, being bad at geography, I thought I'll just fly to the cheapest place I can in Europe. And I ended up in London and I had 30-day round trip tickets. So it was like, I'd gotten an income tax refund that spring for like $3,000 because of like Hope Learning credit or whatever, one of these educational credits. And I was working at a 7-Eleven making $7 an hour. So this was an insane amount of money. But I called up 1-800-Priceline in the pre-internet days and made an offer to fly to Paris and Rome. And they were rejected handedly. And I got a really cheap ticket, like $250 to London. So I was like, I'm going to London. I'm going to figure this out. So I go on this little quest across the continent, with a backpack by myself and never been to a foreign country before. And I get to Rome and the Moses is actually on a hill above the Colosseum, kind of overlooking the Colosseum. There's this little church called San Pedro in Vincia or in Vincole, something like that. It means St. Peter in chains. All right. So I go into this little church and I get in there and there's like, this altar in the center with like a box with like old chains in it that are supposedly the chains that Peter wore when he was released from prison by the angels. And I'm looking around and I don't see this Moses anywhere. And like, this is like way before smartphones and stuff. And I don't have any way to verify it. And I'm like, where the heck is Moses? Like, it's supposed to be in this church. I was relying completely on the fact that this professor told me it was in a church on a hill above the Colosseum. And so I'm like, well, I'm here. Where is it? And I'm walking around this church and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And in the corner, there's like this dark corner and I see in the corner this like shadowy figure that you can barely see. And I realized that it's just hiding out there in the corner, tucked away. And I'm like, man, this is really sad. Right. And I go over there and I'm like, man, I should have brought a flashlight or something. It's that dark. And I see this little box that you can put coins in. And when you put coins in it, it lights up the Moses. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I find some coins and I put it in this box and the thing lights up and it's like, like it's, and it was like, I mean, I felt like, it was going to be like this, like, imagine like, the scene in the movie where like there's like a soundtrack playing and everyone's excited, because this is like that turning point where I'm going to figure out my whole life. And I see this Moses and it's fantastic. I mean, it's a beautiful sculpture. I actually think it might be the best sculpture in the world. I'm not even going to take away from that, but I was very underwhelmed. I was like, yeah, it's a great sculpture, but I still have no idea what I want to do with my life. So I went outside of the church and I sat down on the front steps, and I'm young and dumb. So I started smoking a cigarette because I used to smoke back then. And I'm smoking this cigarette and I'm looking down at the Coliseum, right? And I'm thinking, I still don't know what I want to do with my life, but I know I like old stuff. And so that's how I ended up at all these other places like Petra and, the pyramids in Egypt, so Jordan and Peru. And it was really just like, I don't know, I'm just going to make a list of places that I want to go before I die. And the last thing on that list was Machu Picchu. That was the last thing on the list. And this is the only things I could think of. It was literally the pyramids, Petra, and Machu Picchu. And it was because I was like, I want to see older things. And those are the ones that popped into my head. It turns out that the pyramids are the only one of those things that are actually older than the Colosseum. Machu Picchu is only about 600 or 700 years old. But, I didn't know that then, and we didn't have Google handy. So I went there. I get to Machu Picchu. Right now, focusing on 2008, I'm 30 years old. I just literally crossed the last thing off my bucket list. I've got this law firm that I'm, making money. We're growing. We've got the television commercial. I mean, everything is going really great. I even have a couple of other attorneys that are working for me. And that's where I am, August of 2008. And then something happened that changed the course of my life and gave me the clarity that, that I didn't find by looking at Moses. I don't know if you know what that is. Normally I ask the crowd, but because you're my crowd, you have to tell me. What do you think that is?
It looks kind of like a propeller.
Yeah, well, you know what it is? It's actually the honest to goodness needle that they use to dig into my hip to take bone marrow out of my hip in September of 2008. Now, if you're paying attention to the timeline, September of 2008 is about 2 weeks after I left Machu Picchu. By this point, both of the attorneys that I had working for me had quit. So I went from having 2 attorneys to just me. And then I was diagnosed with leukemia in a 2-week period. I went from pretty much having accomplished everything I wanted to do in my life to in the hospital, dying of leukemia, and my firm was falling apart. And it was a pretty shocking event. This is not something that you plan on. And a quick pro tip, by the way, if you have a bucket list, you shouldn't, because they're bad news. Because when you go to Machu Picchu and you cross that last thing off the bucket list, you get leukemia. So you don't want to do that. But if you do have a bucket list, put a lot of things on it, because you don't want to finish it. Because, I don't know about you, but I'm not ready to die yet. But the thing is, this wasn't even the worst thing that happened to me. So I get diagnosed with leukemia. The law firms, and quickly falling into shambles. We had a situation where between January and August, I made a pretty good amount of money. And so we were doing okay. But the law firm cost about $4,000 or $5,000 a week to break even. And we went from more than that in revenue to zero revenue overnight. And we used our credit cards to pay the bills, to pay my staff. I used the cash and savings that we had. We worked really hard to make sure all of our clients were taken care of, but we just couldn't take new clients, right? I brought in other attorneys and paid them to cover cases for me, but I didn't take new cases. I had a friend from law school come over and do a lot of volunteer work for me to make sure that we could take care of all of our clients. But ultimately, we ended up bankrupt in December of 2010. So that was really the real bottom for me. Listen, when I was in the hospital diagnosed with leukemia, my brother came in and he said to me, I'm sure today's a bad day, right? And I said, well, listen, I was diagnosed with leukemia at 10 o'clock at night. I thought to myself, well, the first 22 hours were pretty good. So no, not really, because I had this this plan of never having bad days, and I was very stubborn at it. And, if this had happened like a week after I decided, I'm sure I would have had a bad day. But, if you've been a decade or more without a bad day, like you built up a little resilience. And I think that's really important. And so I think that's like the number one thing. If you forget everything I talk about, and we're going to circle to real estate here in just a minute, but if you talk about everything I talk about, you forget everything. The most important thing I think you can do is recognize that good and bad stuff happens to everyone, and you don't have to let this stuff ruin your life, right? So you just got to focus on the positive and minimize the negative. And I know, like, Angel and I talked about this off the air before, because she's had things in her life that have been challenging, but she's recognized that there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad in life, and I think that's super important. But I'll tell you, that day, going in front of a bankruptcy trustee was a day that I was really worried about. Like you file bankruptcy in December, and it's scheduled for early January. Actually, I think it was late December, scheduled for this hearing, and I didn't go in front of this group of people and a bankruptcy trustee, a person who, frankly, I'd been in front of hundreds of times in my professional capacity, someone I know really well. And he was like the scary trustee. There's like in the bankruptcy world, there are some trustees that are kind of easy to deal with, and then there's ones that are a little bit harder, and then there's the scary trustee. That's who this guy was, right? So if you're watching, Jeff, his name is Jeff also, I promise I'm not mad at you. But anyway, like, so I'm in front of this scary trustee, and I'm like nervous about it. And like, I don't get nervous very easy, but I'm like, this is just really embarrassing. I'm going in front of, like, I'm a bankruptcy attorney, and I'm going in front of all these other attorneys and stuff and saying, hey, I'm bankrupt, right? And I sat down, and normally he just starts right away. And he looked at me, and he looked at my wife, and he said, I'm really sorry you're going through this. And that meant a lot, actually, because I never heard him say a nice word to anyone that came in front of him before. But he knew, it was just, this stuff can happen to anyone. It doesn't really matter. Like, I mean, if I could go back and do it differently, could I have prepared differently and maybe prevented this from happening? Maybe, right? Like, maybe I could have started investing in real estate when I was 15. And so I had this like other stream of income, but I didn't do that. And I don't know very many 15-year-olds that do. And, the stupid part is I should have, because that was the one thing I liked. And back when I was traveling Europe, I was talking to random people about how I wanted to be a real estate investor. And when I was 15, I was like, sneaking out of my bedroom late at night to watch like late night infomercials with no money down programs, stuff like that. Cause I'm a weirdo like that. I mean, I really do like real estate, but I didn't do it. I didn't really buy any real estate until after all this. Then like flash forward, right? Like if that was the end of my story, it would be tragic. But the reality is it's not the end of my story. Now we're 10 years later, right? I mean, not even actually, like 9.5 years later, and I don't have a job. And I do real estate investing full time. And that's the power of real estate, right? And that's why, like, when you talk about real estate investing rocks, right, which it really does, it's an amazing thing. I'm really, really passionate about helping people get involved in real estate and make those kind of, positive life changes.